Well, no, actually, I don't agree with that figure. The figure that we've calculated from those same figures is nearer to 82,000.
How have you calculated those figures? Because they look more like the figures for families who are not getting their first or perhaps second choice of primary school, rather than actually not having a place at all.
Well, there's lots of different figures here. So the aggregate of all these figures show that clearly that there is a pupil places crisis. So there are figures about the number of families who won't get their first choice schools today. That's about 1 in 10 of all families today won't be getting their first choice, and around 1 in 20 families won't be getting any of their choices of school. And those
but there is quite a big difference, isn't there, just to clarify, between not having a place anywhere at a primary school and not getting your first choice, because many families would still be happy or at least satisfied with a place at their second or third choice. They will have a place. It's not the same thing, is it?
Well, no, but 1 in 20 families won't get any of their options at all, and some of those won't be offered a place at all anywhere, and that's why we're seeing a very significant increase in the number of children in oversized classes. These figures are now at the highest level they've been for 15 years, with nearly 500,000 children in class sizes over a 30, which is not what parents want. We're also seeing the biggest rise in what we call Titan primary schools, so primary schools of 800 or more. I think there were about 16 of those schools at the beginning of this government's time in office, and now these are well into the hundreds of schools. So we're seeing more children being pushed into larger class sizes, and some schools having to get really big in order to accommodate the rise in pupil numbers.
Schools, of course, is not necessarily a problem if the class sizes are still reasonable. The big class sizes, yes, parents will be concerned about. I take your point. The Department for Education, though, says free schools will make up the gap. Will that be enough?
Well, no, I mean, they won't make up the gap. I mean,
well, they will make up some of the gap.
Well, the issue with the free market approach, the free school approach, is that simply leaving such a big increase in demand to market forces just isn't acceptable.
Well, when you say market forces, you mean free schools in areas where there are shortages will take up some of the pupils that aren't finding places in some of the state schools?
Well, let's hope they do, but the evidence so far has been that many of the free schools that have opened have been in areas of not high need. In fact, of the free schools that have already opened, only 4% are in the areas of most acute need. And simply leaving to chance, really, that some organisation or some body of parents are going to come along and want to open a school where it's needed just isn't sufficient. And when you look at some of areas like Manchester, London, areas where there's really high demand, Milton Keynes and others, this approach is just not working. And that's why local government leaders are making the same argument as me today. Tory local government leaders are making the same argument as me today, that we've got to give local authorities both the powers and the resources they need to ensure that they can meet that statutory obligation of ensuring that every child has a place.
What do you think the role of immigration has played? Priti Patel, the Employment Minister, has said that the shortfall in primary school places is due to uncontrolled migration from the EU, particularly in areas like London, where the birth rate is increasing, and that has put pressure on public services.
Well, I think this is a bit of scaremongering by Priti Patel. I mean, let's just disaggregate some of the figures in terms of new arrivals to this country. So families arriving now, these figures are very small in comparison to the overall.
But what about the figures over the last 5-10 years?
And then if you look at the rising birth rate, and let's just remember that having a rising birth rate is a very good thing for our country and our economy. These are the people who are going to be paying.
To immigrants?
Only a quarter of the new births in this country are from foreign-born mothers, and many of those will have British fathers. But a rising birth rate is a good thing for the country. These are people who will pay our pensions, pay for our NHS going forward. And you might remember, as I do, sort of 15, 20 years ago, the big policy issue and problem for our country was a falling birth rate and an ageing population. And how
is that
were we
why
going to pay
Labour
for
was
public
very
services?
keen to increase immigration figures in order to actually increase the population in areas where, as you say, it would be seen as a positive move?
Well, it wasn't about increasing, necessarily being keen to increase immigration, but overall, where immigration has had a net benefit on our country in terms of people coming here to work and contributing and so on. Of course, there are parts of the country where we need to deal with that, where it's particularly acute. And place planning is part of that, but that is about local areas having the powers and the resources they need to deal with these issues. But overall, the increases to place planning and the places crisis that we're seeing is because of a rising birth rate, which is a good thing for the country, which we've known has been coming for a long time and which the government have woefully failed to deal with because they want to leave it to the free market.
And you've admitted, we've known about it for an awfully long time, some of that will have fallen under Labour's final years in government, and Labour, that government, has been blamed for not planning properly. You knew that there was going to be a demographic bulge far later down the line, and you didn't plan for it in terms of primary school places at the time you should have done.
Well, that's nonsense. I mean, we built
it's not nonsense. You said yourself 15 to 20
we built
years ago.
over 1,000 primary schools, and this is about sufficiency. The families who are today finding out whether they have got a place or not, their children are aged 3 or 4. They weren't even born at the time of the last government coming into office. To try and blame Labour, is a bit rich, quite honly.
Well, except that this problem has been going on for quite a number of years, and you've been predicting it for a number of years.
Well, it's been coming, and new places have been created over the last few years, but not enough, and they're not going to be enough coming in on stream over the next few years, which is what the LGA and others are saying today. And this is about planning properly. It's a sufficiency argument. You wouldn't want 10, 15 years ago to have classrooms with teachers in it with nobody in them. That would be a surplus of places. So you have to have sufficient number of places, and the government aren't creating sufficient number of places, and that's the issue. It's not about actual absolute numbers, it's about sufficient places, and that is something they are woefully neglecting, and they are not putting in place the powers that people need locally to plan for their areas and make sure that parents aren't disappointed.
Lucy Powell, thank you.
Thank you.